The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for joining this webinar presentation entitled Donor Visits. This webinar is part of the Indiana Historical Society's Heritage Support Grants Program, made possible by Lilly Endowment Incorporated. My name is Bryce Gorman, and I am the fundraising educator in local history services at the Indiana Historical Society. My goal is to help organizations build robust fundraising programs so they can be effective at their mission. I'm responsible for the educational curriculum that is an important part of our Heritage Support Grants program. I offer free workshops, webinars, and consultations to organizations in Indiana. So why donor visits? What is the reason why this deserves its own webinar? Face-to-face visits are the single most effective solicitation method available to any fundraising organization. Does not matter how big, small, how many major donors, small donors you have. An institution's largest gifts will invariably come from personal asks. It is tried and true for over a century. There's an 80-20 rule for fundraisers. 80% of those gifts are going to come from 20% of the donors. It varies about 5% here or there from year to year, but this 20% of your donors, these are the donors you want to be meeting. So how do you prioritize which of these donors? Your largest, wealthiest donors should be your top priorities, those who've made large gifts, those with the capacity to make large gifts, with those with family wealth. But you also want to engage individuals who have been supporting your organization for a long time. You want to continue that relationship, or those who have put your organization, in their estate. These are people who, over the long term, visits will help cultivate those relationships. Now, these are going to fall more in line with those cultivation visits, and I'm going to cover that in the next couple of slides. This is not to say you should avoid new donors or maybe donors who don't have the same capacity. If you have the time, meet as many donors as possible. Just prioritize the donors who can make the biggest impact. So I know it's easy to say, meet with all the donors you can, but the first crucial step is getting in front of your prospect. Many fundraisers find it helpful to use a rule of three when asking donors to meet with you. So that's finding 3 reasons why this person would spend their time with you. This can include, I like to use getting to know you, introducing them to leadership if you want them to come to you or you want to bring a board member to them, sharing your vision for the future, thanking them for their previous support. Those are some of the reasons. So when you reach out to a donor, either through phone call or email, you are going to be saying, hey, I'd like to meet with you. I'd like to talk about I'd like to introduce you to one of our board members. I'd like to share our vision for the organization, and I'd like to talk to you about your investment in this organization. So that rule of 3 gives reasons for the donor to meet with you. So when you are scheduling with a donor, consider their needs. Is this person going to be very busy? Do they have a lot of demands on their time? Is this person, do they have a lot of deadlines coming up, either events, personal issues that may take precedence? Be aware of upcoming holidays or events. So Crawfordsville has an annual strawberry festival, and you just don't want to make meetings during that time. You also don't want to schedule meetings during Christmas, obviously. So just be mindful of the schedule and how that can affect somebody's availability. So say those who have a little more capacity and maybe they're retired, they might go to, say, Florida for the winter. So keep that in mind when you're scheduling. Have several meeting times and locations to offer to any prospective donor. So only a fraction of donor meetings involve solicitation. Fundraising is mostly about building relationships. Your first meeting or meetings with a donor are going to be introductory. The donor's learning about your organization at the same time you are learning about them. So I recommend managing expectations in these first meetings. A lot of donors might get a little nervous, wondering, are they going to hit me up for money? Just be upfront. Explain to that person that all you want to use this time for is you want to get to know them, let them get to know you, and just see what the best relationship is moving forward. Let them know that you would ultimately like to discuss their philanthropy, but only when it's right for them. And if it happens to be right for them at that meeting, fine, ask them. But they should at least know that you're not there just to ask for money. You're there to get them involved. And the money will be a part of that in the future. So your goal for these meetings, actually your goal for every meeting, is to come away with a next step. This could be an invitation to a future event or an invitation to come tour your organization. An introduction to volunteers or staff or other donors, and or just following up on some details you discussed during the meeting. Say they want to know more about some of your genealogy files. So you want to set up your next step before you leave the meeting. Let your donor know that you'll be following up with them shortly. And I often send donors a thank you email or a card after meeting with them. It's just a place to reinforce what was discussed at the meeting. After the intro, and by the way, all of these meetings, I have questions that you can use to ask and gain more information out of your donors. So introductory meetings, how's business? What's your interest in us? What's the best way to stay connected? And for cultivation, you're going to be digging a little bit deeper. Once you've established a relationship with your donor, it is time to cultivate that relationship. These meetings, they're going to be less formal, and they should feel natural to both you and the donor. This is not to say you avoid discussing philanthropy. Giving should always be a constant topic. Your goal in these meetings is to organically connect the donor and your organization. So I like to use invite, inquire, involve, and inform. So, invite them to come see the space, invite them to attend events, inquire about their interests, inquire about their expertise in an area, involve them in some of your exhibit work, or ask them to volunteer, and keep them informed of what you're doing. All cultivation events, all cultivation meetings are the lead up to a solicitation. Your goal is to have a clear picture of the donor, who they are, what are their passions, and what is their capacity to make a gift. As I mentioned earlier, keep philanthropy in the discussion and let your donor know you would like to discuss making a larger impact on your organization. So after all of that, now cultivation can take a while, but once you've spent the time introducing, qualifying, cultivating that donor, the solicitation meeting should feel very natural. If you have kept philanthropy in the discussion, your donor is not going to be surprised by any kind of ask. A solicitation meeting does have to be a little more formal, a little more intimate. You want to avoid distractions, both for you and the donor. So if at dinners, for instance, a waiter can distract you when you're about to make your pitch, or if it's in the middle of a very busy room or something like that. So I suggest make it one-on-one if possible. Have an exact ask amount, an exact purpose, and a timeline in mind. If you feel like, they're not going to go for it, that is the donor's decision to make. They can decide if this is the right time. They can decide if it's the right amount. If you have any paperwork backing up the solicitation, say a gift agreement, project or exhibit renderings, have them ready, but don't just force them on the donor. Let them ask for it. Be ready for both a yes and a no. If it's yes, congratulations. If the answer is no, be upfront and ask if there is a better time or a better amount or a better purpose that would work for the donor. Sometimes when a donor says no, it's not right now or that's not the right amount. So find out what that no means. And I've got a couple options for ways to ask for money. I've found them to be very helpful, and feel free to take them, use them, adapt them for your own organization. So the relationship doesn't end with a check. I think that it's only really the beginning, because you've started a new partnership with this donor. They trust you, and now it becomes stewardship. Your task after they've committed to the gift is to properly steward them. These meetings will serve to remind the donor that you are using their funds responsibly, and you're keeping them aware of all the progress you've made. Even in stewardship meetings, you want to keep philanthropy in the conversation. Remind them that their gift is making a difference, and if you are effective in your stewardship, it's going to lead to further and hopefully larger gifts from these donors. This is my contact information. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions about the presentation or you'd like to talk through anything a little more. Thank you so much for joining me for the Donor Visits webinar. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about fundraising.